Alright guys, so I went ahead and put some all metal on here. You can see I just kind of globbed it down, pressed it down. That way I could fill the seam, fill all those little voids and seams from the weld. I just put it on, so I'm going to give that 15-20 minutes like it says, and then go ahead and sand it down. And that way hopefully it'll seal up, any tiny little voids that I can't see and some of the little imperfections from the welds and the grinding. But that stuff's just called all metal. I'm sure y'all have heard of it, but I got it on Summit. God, I almost hit my head on my damn. I got it on Summit. I don't remember how much it was. Maybe 20-30 bucks. But anyway, so that's what I'm putting in there to kind of seal up those welds, just to make sure. But so I'm gonna go ahead and let that dry up. Once it dries here in about 15-20 minutes, then I'm gonna sand it down. I've gotten most of the door, pretty much all of it sanded down. There's some old seam sealer, still gotta dig that out. But it's getting pretty close. I'm hoping here in the next day or two I can lay some epoxy on this thing and get some color on it. That way it actually looks like a door again. But we'll see how it goes. I'll get back to you. Alright, so I wanted to show you all a little something. Everybody's always asking, or while I'm watching other videos, people always ask about different kind of fillers and how they gum up your sandpaper. Well, here's a perfect example. So this is dried, it says 15-20 minutes. I let it dry for about 35-40 minutes before I started sanding on this all metal. And while I'm sitting here going to town on it, it's digging in real good. I'm using 80 grit right now just to knock this down. Well, just like everybody always says, yes, it does clog your sandpaper up. It is what it is. It's gonna happen. So my little trick to get rid of it, take your welding wire brush, and it's kind of hard to do this one hand, but if you just sit there and dig at this, and it's like I said, it's hard to do it with one hand, but here, I'm gonna set the camera down and then knock it off, and then I'll show you. I mean, that just, with me just scraping that, 2 or 3 scrapes with that wire brush, it knocked it right off, and it's almost a brand new piece of paper. But anyways, just wanted to show you all that little trick. I know people always complain about, some of the body fillers clogging up the sandpaper, and that's just my little trick, and I don't have to sit here and replace it every 5 minutes when this thing gets clogged up. Anyways, just figured I'd show you all that little trick that I do to get rid of all that filler that gets stuck inside the sandpaper. All right, we got some color on it. It's finally starting to look like a door again. I kind of jumped ahead. I know I said in that last clip that I'd already worked on, already started stripping all the paint off. So I went ahead and finished that up. This section over here, like I said previously, that was difficult to get all that rust off. So this was that little sandblaster I was talking about. It's just one of them little $80 Harbor Freight, sandblasters, and it worked absolutely perfect. I mean, it got everything out of those little crevices and cracks that I needed. That was one thing I forgot to do. I said I was going to do is I accidentally left some of that old seam sealer in there, but I can go back and dig that out and kind of maybe brush some epoxy on there, or just respray this little section. But anyways, I got it. Finally got it coated in epoxy. I got 3 coats on essentially the jam areas, everything on the bottom. That's all got 3 coats on it. On here I did 2, essentially 2.5, I guess, because I had a little bit left over, so I did just a light dry coat. And I got 3 coats on this whole section, 3 coats down here on this jam, and then everything internal has at least 2 coats on it, which, like I said, this is all going to be inside the car anyways, and there's a cardboard panel that bolts to this, and then essentially whatever kind of interior I go with is going to sit on top of this. But everything that's essentially exposed to elements has 3 coats on it. But finally got some paint on it. It's been a while. I've been working hard on this thing. It's been a while since I posted a video, so hopefully I can put all this together and maybe throw this video up. The bottom came out pretty good. I don't have any complaints on it. The sharp edge, this bottom, I'm not going to touch it. It's still a little tacky. I just shot it, maybe put the third coat on it maybe 25 minutes ago. But the bottom edge, it came out okay. When you look down the side of it, there is a little bit of wave to it, but considering I didn't reskin it, I think it came out okay. But I'm gonna let this sit up for probably a week. That way it'll completely cure. This is the Summit DTM epoxy, so direct to metal epoxy. On the can or the sheet, it says let it sit up at least 4 days. After 4 days, you got to rescuff it to shoot. So I'm assuming after 4 days, it's cured. But I'm gonna give it about a week. I want it to completely cure, settle in. It is getting a little cool outside. In the garage, I've got it 77 degrees with 25% humidity. I got my mini split set on 82, and when that door's cracked like that, that mini split can't, it won't keep the garage exactly what it's set on, because it has to cycle through the air that's in the garage and then warm it up. But I mean, it does what it needs to do. The panel temp, I made sure I checked that, and it was 80 when I sprayed it. It was 80 when I sprayed it, and we're sitting at 77 degrees, or it's 77 on it, so that's plenty. I'm not worried about that at all, especially with that low humidity. But yeah, we'll let this cure up, and then we'll get to work on the other side. One more thing I wanted to add to this video, because I'm going to do this in 2 sections. I'm going to go ahead and put this together and post everything that I've got for the inside, and then that door lip, and then for the other side, when I spray it, I'll probably do a separate video. But the gun I'm using, I've got 2 Harbor Freight guns. Yes, I'm kind of cheap. I bought that little cheap $15 one. I don't like that at all. Then I went back and I got the Black Widow, $200 gun, and I really like it. It sprays a lot better than, of course, the $15 cheapo. My point is, whenever, of course, big surface areas, it's pretty easy to set that gun up. You just set it up and get your fan pattern right. And if you got a little too much pressure, not enough pressure, you can kind of work with it still, because you're just covering a big area. But where it gets tricky is when you get into these little gaps. Like, you can't just have your fan wide open, the pressure wide open, and the fluid wide open. You're gonna soak that, or you're gonna have to move so quick that it's not gonna get inside, down in there. So what I did, and this is just me, I'm no paint expert at all. I've only used an HVLP gun a few times. This is honestly the first time I shot epoxy with it. But what I did was I set this piece of paper up, and you can see all my different patterns, choking the air off, choking the fluid off, cranking them all, cranking them all the way up, halfway up and down. But to get inside those little crevices, clearly you want to crank everything down, and you still want that paint to itemize really well. So you can see where I started, and I just kept hitting the trigger, and then until I got it down to where I liked it. And you can see, I started getting these little light, good itemized, tiny cigar looking patterns. And clearly that's what you want when you get into those little tight spaces. So that's what I did to get inside these little tight spaces. That way I didn't have runs everywhere. Because if you just tried to come in here and spray that on the same settings where you sprayed the bigger surface areas, you're gonna either A, miss a ton, or B, you're gonna try to slow down and shoot those little tiny crevices, and you're just gonna get hella runs. You're gonna waste so much paint trying to do that. And if you do that, it's gonna end up all over your floor. You're gonna get splattered all over everything. So take your time and set it up and lay a big piece of paper down, and you can sit here and play with those settings until you get it right. And once you get it right, you'll be able to get those little gaps. Because I'm telling you, trying to get in there with the settings that I had on this would have been impossible. I mean, it would have gone on too thick, then it wouldn't dry properly, then it might not cure right, then you're gonna have to strip it back down and start all over. So to get inside all those little spots, you gotta play with your settings to get your settings right, so you can get get that paint in there, get that epoxy in there so it'll seal that metal up. Anyways, that's my 2 cents. Like I said, I am no expert by any means. I've actually never painted a car, and this is my first time laying epoxy, but that's what I figured out. You just have to sit there and play with this gun until you get the settings where you want it. And towards the end on this paper, that's where I got it where I liked it, and I was able to get inside all those little crevices without flooding the whole panel with paint.